They don't care if they are ready. No one checks for the foundation. Everybody wants to do AI. Check your prompt before you go. A little arrogant cause a no. LLMs, large language models, they are so in right now. I want my own. Never gonna know it all, never gonna catch all eyes. There's more AI tools than I can count. Another job bites the dust. Another job bites the dust. And another job gone, and another job gone. Another job bites the dust. Hey, AI's gotta get used to another job bites the dust. GPT is like my lover. She knows my secrets more than anyone else, and always learns from them. What a feeling, so productive. With AI tools I have such an easy life. How will I know if this can be trusted? The only way is to fact check everything. What's law got to do with it? AI regulations are coming. Don't stop investing. Can't afford stagnating. We have to make AI work. Don't stop investing.
All right, man. You really brought it home with
Right.
that medley at the end there.
Yeah,
That's,
thank you.
I was bopping my head over here. That was great. Listen, welcome everybody to this is like the best intro I've ever seen. Welcome everybody to the Heart of AI, Building People First Strategies with Tiankai Feng. We're here, of course, to celebrate the release of Tiankai's new book, Humanizing AI Strategy. Let's get things rolling. So, just so you know, this is a live show. This is not pre-recorded webinar or anything like that, which means that if you get your comments into the chat, whether you're watching, wherever you're watching, we will be answering your questions, right? So like if there's stuff you want to ask Tiankai, now is the time to ask him. Get it in and I will field your questions as we go, and then we'll save some time at the end as well for you to get them in. So let's do some quick introductions before we get started. Of course, I'm Ryan Daly, VP of Product Strategy at Good Data. I'm happy to be your host today. I'm very thrilled that Tiankai asked me to join. And Tiankai, the man of the hour, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. It's great to be here. I'm Tiankai Feng. I'm the Director for Data and AI Strategy here at ThoughtWorks. I'm basically responsible for the offerings related to data and AI strategy as well as governance. And I'm very passionate about the human side of data and AI, which is also why we are happy today to talk about basically the human side of AI in this case. And yeah, thanks a lot, Ryan, for doing this and for being the guest host with us today.
Yeah, I was really thrilled when you asked me because I love Humanizing AI Strategy. I just think it's such a great book and a great follow up to Humanizing Data Strategy. So congratulations on the release of the new book. It seems like the first one I think has been very successful, and the early all the reviews, everybody I know who's read this says it's great. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So the book covers how to build and implement an AI strategy that's sustainable, effective, and ultimately human. And I think that's probably where we want to start off here. Is to focus on that. So this comes pretty hot on the heels of the first book. And why did you feel the need to come out with the second book so quickly? And how does it build on the first book?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it actually happened while I was writing my previous book, Humanizing Data Strategy, last year. because a lot of the topics that I was thinking about human centricity actually were more applicable to the topic of AI rather than data only. So I kind of made like a judgment call about what I would keep within the first book in terms of Humanizing Data Strategy, but it already left a little bit of a backlog, right? So basically, I would see that some things would be more applicable to AI strategy and how that works. And in a way, what actually did really motivate to do it so quickly is I realized there were so many things that were going wrong in the world with AI and in the industry, and so much polarization also between basically the hype around of everyone believing in it, and also the other side of not believing in it at all and seeing it only as a threat. So basically, because of that, I realized that it's really important to write a book about it and to really learn from what went wrong in data strategy and what we all experienced the hard way, but now do it by default in the right way and not having to do the same mistake again.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to focus on. I mean, one of the things I see a lot out there in the industry right now is people saying, "Hey, you can't do AI until you have your data strategy right, right? Like if you build AI on bad data, it has a bad foundation and it won't work." Is that what you see right now with AI implementations? Would you say that evaluation is accurate?
I think so. I mean, of course, it becomes more and more of a platitude right now, right? So it feels more a little bit like garbage in, garbage out. So we make it
Mhm.
sound like that all of the AI applications today need all of the good data. But I think we can be a bit more nuanced about it, right? So if it's really a very specific use case of an AI application and you have already the needed data for it through external sources and it doesn't really rely on data that is not maybe of the highest quality, then it is okay, right? We don't have to make it sound like you have to have all of the right data foundation until you do anything with AI. And nowadays, anyway, a lot of the AI models have foundational models that just need to be fine-tuned, right? So in a way, I think we need to just be really clear about where are the let's say dangers, but also where are the opportunities of using it right away versus also just needing to do a little bit more there. But nonetheless, right, definitely good data is needed if you be more specific and tailored to your own organization's context. So that is definitely true.
Why don't you walk us through? So you established in Humanizing Data Strategy this 5 C's framework. And of course,
Right.
in Humanizing Data Strategy, you applied it to the data strategy. You've kind of taken that framework and now applied it to the world of AI. So can you walk us through a little bit what the 5 C's framework is and how it applies to artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. So the 5 C's really is rooted in human needs and human traits, right? Which is why also they shouldn't sound so groundbreaking. But they basically are competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience. And all of those 5 C's, of course, are, as you mentioned, in both of the books. But the idea is that those are really the 5 C's that allow us to have a memorable device to actually go into focusing on the human side of it. And in the side of AI, right, that has a very specific meaning. So, for example, competence in terms of AI would really mean the topic of AI literacy on the one hand side, but also the need for business expertise to actually apply AI to the right things. You actually need to bridge it from the what is possible to the what actually makes sense and what is driving value, right? Collaboration is not only about human to human collaboration anymore, but it also means how does a human to AI agent collaboration look like, AI agent and AI agent collaboration look like, in all of the combinations that we have, because in a way it's changing our collaboration model drastically depending on how much autonomous actions we give to agents, right? Then we also have communication, which also is not only human to human communication anymore, but we also have chatbots now and conversational AI, where actually we are not only talking now through like natural language to AI models to actually do things, but they are talking to each other and they talk to us as well. And we have a lot of choices to make how that actually works. In terms of creativity, it really, I think, drives the aspect of how does creativity in the age of AI look like, because now everyone can generate with a few prompts a lot of great things, right? But what does it mean for human creativity too, right? So in a way, the ideation and original ideas really are still human, whereas the, let's say, incremental and iterative creativity tuning can happen through AI, which means also we can spend more time ideally on the original thought process and less time on the production of assets. And then lastly, also we have conscience, right? And I think that is really a big deal because it's just so early still for us to be able to realize all of the consequences of what can go wrong with AI, that we need to just have some strong principles right away to actually make sense and not be only reactively compliant, but be actually proactively ethical and sustainable.
So that outlines kind of what a human AI strategy looks like. So what's an inhuman AI strategy look like? Is it just the opposite of those things?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, in a way, I feel like a lot of the conversations I see today in the industry feels not inhuman, but just deprioritizing human, right? It does feel like we are chasing the newest model and the newest technologies, and we don't think about too much about the consequences, what it means for our own empathy and our own mental health and our ways of working, right? And that is something I think just needs to be balanced a little bit more, right? I wouldn't say that anyone is on purpose being against human beings, right? I think in the end, we're not that kind of way, or we are not evil, right? I hope. But it's still about basically not forgetting about the human being. And that happens far too often in technology disruptions and technology transformations, that we just forget about the human beings that need to use it, they need to coexist with it, and that need to collaborate with it in the end.
There is this fear I see a lot that AI is really going to threaten our jobs. And maybe threaten our creativity or have some negative impact on our human values. How do you recommend people address those concerns while actually making use of the technology, right? Because it has so much beneficial potential. I think these downsides are real. How do we balance this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing is that I wouldn't say that AI is definitely going to replace humans, but we need to reframe it into it can automate human tasks, right? But it only can automate a specific type of tasks, which is the repetitive and, let's say, manually routine tasks that are very mechanical. Those kind of tasks that we don't really need to think about anymore, we just kind of do. Those are the best tasks actually to be replaced and to be automated through AI. And that means actually normally for that with people that don't like to do that, they can actually focus on other things now, right? They can actually now focus more on the critical thinking. They can more focus on making better decisions, right? Instead of doing all of the manual work that is needed. But there are, of course, also those people that they enjoy doing those manual repetitive tasks, right? Those that maybe have done it for decades already and have always done it that way. And maybe for them, they never wanted to actually adjust and want to kind of learn new things. That is, of course, a tricky thing. And I think those might be the people that are most impacted by it, because it kind of forces a change in responsibilities in the future and a change of tasks. Because ideally, those people are the best to then steer AI agents and provide feedback and tune them, right, and work with them. But if they're not willing to do that and they want to keep doing their old job, I think things might get really difficult in the future.
Yeah, how does someone navigate that? Like, there's a big question right now. Okay, what skills should I get? So whether you're, say, someone early in their career, or maybe you're mid-career, but you're kind of seeing this AI wave happening and worried, like, where should they focus their efforts on making sure that they can best take advantage of this technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we think about the topic of AI literacy, right, I think there is this really great AI literacy framework that specifies that not AI literacy doesn't mean that everyone needs to know everything about AI, right? How it works, how to develop it, how to engage with it, how to do everything with it. And because it can feel quite, frankly, very overwhelming that you have to learn all of that now to be even able to deal with it. But the literacy framework actually differentiates into 4 types of interactions with AI, right? It's about engaging with AI, it's creating with AI, it's managing AI, and it's designing AI, right? And in the job that everyone is in, you can think about how much of those 4 types of different tasks you are actually doing and that you need to do to be successful, because it doesn't mean you need to be good in every single 4 of those different attitudes, right? So for example, a marketing team lead would actually be more about engaging with AI, because they need to actually kind of identify what are the right interaction ways and how to use it then to talk to a customer, right? Then another one could be rather a machine learning engineer who's actually building an AI model, and that's designing AI instead, right? And that's someone who actually has to think about what the model is, et cetera, et cetera. But not everyone needs to focus on everything. So I think we just need to actually reflect on what our job is, identify where AI fits into all of this, and actually also identify where we want to go, right? How deep do we want to go into it? Do we want to rather become the trainers of AI? Do we want to become the designers of AI? Or do we want to just become a customer of AI? That's up to us too. So it's a mix of our own experience with our preferences, where we want to be. But I think not choosing engaging AI with AI at all is not going to be a choice anymore.
Yeah, I agree. It's you do see people out there who think this is all just going to blow over, and those of us who are old enough to kind of remember, say, the early wave of the internet, people thought that too. There was that contingent of, this is all just hype; it's going to go away, right? And
Exactly.
look how transformed our lives have been over the last 20 years since then. We do have a question I want to ask from somebody on LinkedIn. So as I mentioned at the outset, right, if you get your questions in, we will ask them. So here's one from someone from LinkedIn. They say regarding ethical AI, ethics definition is different according to where you are, what community you're in, your cultural background. So how do we get common ground or common agreement on this? Is there any sort of consortium like the IEEE or ISO that exists for AI today? Just kind of what are your thoughts on kind of cross-cultural AI ethics and whether or not we have anything in place to help build that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, the assumption here is that we need to find consensus and common agreement across everything, but I don't think we can, and I don't think thereby that we should. But because it's very similar to any global versus local kind of technology rollout, right? And we're always going to have a different culture and different mindsets and different attitudes of people in different regions, and thereby also their different definitions of ethics. I think how it would work in my head, at least, is that there's, of course, let's say, a most basic common ground between all of the cultures. Let's say about human rights, for example, right? At least like that we should all agree that it's not great to intentionally hurt people. That should be at least, for example, the most common ground. And then it goes, of course, into more specific areas and can be very specific about how people are data privacy conscious or not, right? That is different countries, for example, how they're willing to innovate versus stay a little bit more conservative on things, right? As well, that is also there. What we need to do is we need to be able to recognize that, and that only works through feedback mechanisms, right? That if we want to design AI systems, we want to put the right principles in place, we need to co-design them together with the people who are going to use it, and not just hope that we can rely on this one global standard that everyone's using to do it. Nonetheless, I think a lot of organizations are making a lot of progress there nowadays about AI ethics, and a lot of nonprofits are going that direction too. And I think it's the right place to be in there now. I would encourage everyone who's interested to do it to join those organizations and the efforts of those organizations to actually do it, right? And just help with it to identify what can go wrong. I think especially now with what's always interesting with big tech, right? Always turns from being a big opportunity into getting more and more, it feels like evil almost, right, of what they're doing. So that is the question, right? Like, where is the boundary? Because at some point there are all companies that are commercial, and the only counter effect to it is a non-commercial neutral point of view to actually drive it out of good intentions and not from a commercial point of view. And that, I think, will always be the dynamic that we have also in the past already with data regulations. What with AI regulations is probably the same.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. I do think you're right. There is this kind of this tension between the desire for a global framework and a global standard versus the different communities that exist and the needs of those communities, which may not always line up, right? It's like anything else. It takes a lot of work to try to come up with something that's broadly applicable to most people in most cultures. I do want to, I do, so one of the 5 C's you talk about collaboration. There's this idea of co-creation.
Yeah.
And you talk about that a lot in both books. Can you talk about what co-creation looks like
Yeah.
when it comes to working with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I address it actually in the AI strategy book from different angles, right? I think on the one hand side, it's about the human to human collaboration first and foremost, right? So how do we as different departments and the people with different expertise even drive AI applications for value, right? How does it look like? And just by learning from the world of data that we had before so far and still have, that is always the tricky thing, right? It either is very transactional, so it's not like you're actually aligned, you just do it for someone and then the transaction is over, right? Or it feels very coordinated but still isolated, right? Where it's just like, yeah, let's just keep each other informed, we just kind of do it, but we're not really driving towards the same goal. It's just kind of just for transparency and let's see what happens. But for AI initiatives now to actually be successful, right, and to be actually be valuable, we need to all work in the same direction, right? We need to bring the different expertises together and cross-functionally drive it towards success. So that is why I try to aim for this co-creation approach, because for me it implies three things, right? One is having a shared purpose and a shared goal, right? So we actually do want to achieve the same thing. We want to make this AI pilot really be successful and scalable and valuable, right? For example, it also requires, let's say, the clear contributions of each side, right? What is my contribution to it? I'm the one who's going to develop it. I'm the one who's going to design it and give feedback on it. And I'm the one who's actually going to use it in a business process, for example, right? And lastly, it's also about the formal commitment, right? Like that we need to embed it into our OKRs. We need to also put it into our plans and roadmaps to actually do it in the right way. But then the other side of co-creation is also how do we work with agents, right? What is the things that we actually want to work with agents together on? What will stay tasks that are human only? And what are things where it's agent completely and agent-led without a lot of human interaction there and human interception? And it's more about finding the way to define it and being clear and intentional about how to do it, to not just kind of automate as much as possible and then regret it afterwards about how much it should have been all automated because it led to consequences. So actually this co-creation is more of that mindset, right? To think what is the right degree of co-creation together with AI, and how can we define the right tasks, and how can we define the right kind of processes to actually make it in a work in a balanced way.
That's awesome. We had a bunch of good questions come in while you were explaining co-creation, and I want to make sure we hit some of them. So one of them goes back. This is from Andrea. He asks, going back to your 4 AI literacy buckets. He says he loves this idea. He wants to know in practice, how do you map roles onto these without freezing people into fixed boxes? So he says he's seeing value in rotating people through, engaging, creating, managing, and designing to build range and reduce fear of change. Like, how do you see that working in practice?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's, let's say, the more basic knowledge about how AI works. That's something that I think everyone should know about, right? That, I mean, those include simple things where it's like, it might act like a human being, but it's not actually a human being. So if you share a secret with an AI application, be careful where it ends up and just be conscious, right, of what sensitive and secret information you're sharing, for example, and where it might end up, right? Those might be a security related one. Same as in, you should not believe everything that Gen AI generates, because of course you have hallucinations. So don't just blindly trust what the results are and what is there. So in that way, that is, like, I would say, across all of the roles, that is a basic foundational knowledge that we need to have. But then depending on people's jobs, right, that is where it gets interesting, because based on their tasks that they have every day, and based on where AI will be applied, this is what defines then in what boxes, so to say, they might fit into. But I don't mean that by and you only fit them into one box and they will forever be in that box. It's more about that there's a guidance towards what they need to know and what they need to learn to be able to fulfill those tasks. And if those tasks change over time, they just need to adapt it and learn more about that direction too. And in a way, right, theoretical learning is never as strong as practical learning, right? So I think that needs to go hand in hand too. So in a way, those boxes are just helping for you to, like, have a quick base and like a minimum base of knowledge, and then let them try out things with AI in the right kind of guardrailed way. And then if they want to go into the other boxes more, and because the job needs it, then they can do it. But at least then they have a guided way to do it.
That's awesome. So listen, this has been fascinating so far. Thank you, Tiankai. If you would like to explore these ideas yourselves through Tiankai's book, you can get a copy of it here. by looking at this QR code. So so do pick it up. I highly recommend it. In fact, if you open to the first or second page, you'll see a blurb from me in the book. So I mean, the strongest possible endorsement for the book Humanizing AI Strategy by Tiankai. And thanks again for doing this, Tiankai. We've got some more great questions that came in. So I want to ask this one from Veronica because this is close to my heart. She says, I come from a strong, I mean, this is right up my alley. I come from a strong business intelligence background. Me too, Veronica. Working with tools like Tableau and Power BI, with a momentum around generative AI and IEA. How do you see the future of traditional BI platforms? Do you think they will adapt and integrate with generative analytics, or is their role going to diminish over time?
Yeah, I will start answering it, but I'm sure, Ryan, you have an answer for it too. So actually, maybe you can also then add some things to it too. So I think definitely will impact it, but it will impact it in different degrees and maturities, I believe, right? So what happens now, I see more and more, is that those BI platforms are including Gen AI as well to help with visualizing and making data available, right? So for example, you have now Copilot in Power BI, right? And you can ask it to actually design charts for you, and you can easily do that. And this way it helps directly in the creating the charts part of it all, and it becomes more productive kind of help. But over time, I think it will become more conversational, right? So the question is, do we even need dashboards and that access layer that's visual, or is it just a conversational access layer where in the future you're just going to ask a chatbot about the metrics and the KPIs and just gives you it, or it even just automatically tells you every day when it's a good time about what the most important KPIs and metrics are for you, and you kind of get recommendations right away as well. And then even moving forward, right, if there's an AI agent even that's already checking the metrics, and it can take actions on your behalf even, right, and it can make pricing decisions, or it can make any kind of business decisions without you having to interact anymore, then the whole layer and the whole link from business intelligence to actions is automated. That is then maybe the highest degree. And that is something that might happen for, let's say, situations that are less of stakes or that are very much predictable on how they're going to go. But what is needed for that, right, is actually that the data itself becomes more and more accurate and contextual, meaning there's a lot more talking and important needs for the semantics, the ontologies, and all of the knowledge graph topics that is now getting more and more hype, because that has now become the most important part of making the data that BI is supposed to get and make conversational to actually have the right context.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I think you're right, Tiankai. I mean, just ultimately, I think for many tasks, we will take BI out of the loop. Operational tasks where you're making decisions about where to allocate products or something like that, right? Like you won't necessarily at some point you won't necessarily go in and look at a dashboard to try to decide, okay, where should we send the widgets, right? I mean, that like an AI can do that. I do think, though, Veronica, there will still be a place for visualizations in a couple areas. I think dashboards are going to be less used in the future, but I think that's good. What dashboards are really good for is operational oversight of well understood questions where like what the metrics mean and what you would do when those metrics change. And so just because of the way human like pre-attentive and visual processing works, you can consume more information faster through a dashboard than you can through a chat interface in those situations, right? But I think you're ultimately, we are going to see the BI, the front end of data change dramatically. I think for the better. I just think people don't want to go into a BI tool. Let's just be real. They don't, right? They want to access data, interact with it in the places where they actually do their work. And I think AI is going to help with that enormously. So I wouldn't say BI or dashboards are going to go away, but I think instead BI is going to become more of an integrated part of your everyday workflow rather than this separate application that you have to go to when you switch your brain to like decision making mode. That's not going to happen in the future, is what I predict. Okay. Thank you, Veronica. That was a great question. We have lots of other great questions coming in. So let's look at this one by Marcos. He says, many organizations traditionally reliant on producers and gatekeepers now find their gatekeepers overwhelmed by a fire hose of content. How do they evolve in this model?
Good question.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking, I mean, I hope, Marcus, that you're referring to, I would assume you're referring to data producers and data gatekeepers, although that might include, in your case, also unstructured data, since you talk about content, right? But then it's the question, what are the gatekeepers, right? Then the reason why I'm differentiating is, right, whereas what you put in a data lake or a data warehouse, of course, you have gatekeepers and you have some mechanisms in there. But comparably, how many PowerPoint files you put on a SharePoint and how many versions of it all has not been as gatekept before, right? So I would even question if this kind of gatekeeping for unstructured data or creating pictures or videos, right, has actually been there before, because now there might be a need for it, simply because if you put too many versions of the same thing and they have different truths in them, right, and one of them is outdated, or like many of them are outdated, only one, the recent one, is up to date, then without any context, how would AI know, or a model know, that is the correct one and all the ones are wrong, right? So the gatekeeping, I think it's more about the context of it. I don't think we can stop people from creating more content, but it's more about labeling them, categorizing them, and kind of classifying them, that we can put the right context on it. And that's something I think we need to do more. Whereas the gatekeeping for structured data, right, like the typical world of data warehousing or data lakes, right, the gatekeeping should ideally get more and more automated as much as we can too. And right, I mean, yeah, ThoughtWorks, we use a lot of the term policy as code, right? The idea is that if you can not let human beings decide based on a readable policy, that they make their own decisions how to do it, if you put them in like technological guardrails and it's very hard for them to do the wrong things, then actually that's something you can just implement, and then people are going to do the right things more likely. And I hope in the world of also AI model creation, training, deployments, and so on, having some guardrails in place like this, and we learn from data governance towards AI governance, we hopefully can do the same.
Yeah, good answer there, Tiankai. We have another question here from Philip, and thank you for asking all these great questions. You've been a great audience so far. He says, he wants to know, do you see traditional business systems as tools to augment human weaknesses that AI does not have, right? So like memory or reliability of execution, and will those be replaced by AI? I think kind of the heart of the question in my mind is like, we've built this suite of applications that exist to do the things that we're bad at. Are we still going to need those? Because AI is a non-human intelligence. It's not bad at those things, right? In the way we are. So will those applications go away?
That's a good question. Interesting. I mean, so the reason why I'm thinking about the answer is those systems might, and what happens on the systems might evolve from human interactions to agent interactions, right? So you might not always need a huge, very complicated or comprehensive user interface anymore for human users. But maybe for human users, it becomes more only if needed, they need to interject, right? Like human in the loop style, in case something happens and under specific rules, you need a human being to make a judgment call, then this is the new way of interaction. Everything else more becomes a back-end user experience, maybe even agent experience, right? Everyone to think about that. But when it comes to augment human weakness that AI doesn't have, right, I think it's very difficult to differentiate the weakness from the strength. And what I mean by that is, right, that yeah, we might have bad memories compared to, let's say, a system that will always remember things, and we might get tired or are in a bad mood sometimes compared to a system that might not have any moods, right? But in the end, all of that still leads to us making certain decisions, for better or worse. But it's those human decisions that can be really tricky to imitate and completely rely on a machine for. So maybe even being in a specific mood helped us to make the best decision instead of making it a worse decision. So in that case, the weakness actually becomes a strength. So it's difficult for me to say that we can all replace it, right? It's maybe more about actually finding a way how we can let agents and AI models and human beings all have the right experience with it. And that might mean that certain features of a tool will be completely gone, but they will evolve into a way that makes the interaction more possible.
Tiankai, I think that's such a great answer. In a way, our human ability to forget is sometimes a feature and not a bug.
Exactly.
Right?
Like when we forgive people, right? And when we
Yeah.
don't remember all of the bad things like very clearly as before, it might be a good thing for us, even for our mental health. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I do want to ask this. So there's this idea. We've talked a lot about what kind of what we need to do uh, as practitioners to adapt to AI. I'm curious if your thoughts on the opposite, right? In what ways does AI need to better adapt to us?
Right. That is such a great question because we are still the ones designing AI applications, right? And it feels almost paradox to say, how can AI adapt better to us? Because we are still the ones designing them if they're more adaptive to us or not. But you're right. I think how we can make AI more adapted to us is by simply considering more the consequences and the things that can go wrong, and not only focus on the good things that it might bring. And I know that this is a tricky thing because it goes very quickly into that overall philosophical question of innovation versus a kind of regulation, right? Like, how do you find the balance? But I think it's now more important than ever that we do it, because in many cases, if AI is doing one thing, it's going to scale very quickly, and one little small bad decision can become a million small bad decisions all of a sudden, and it's very hard to recover from those. And in some cases, it might have an impact on society that we just cannot recover from, right? So that is really what I think where we need to be more careful. And if that means having more feedback mechanisms and taking feedback from users seriously, or if it's about involving people from other departments, like from the ethical department, the legal department, the DEI department, to actually have a more point of view on things, all of that can be helpful. So we don't have to make these maybe very overwhelming decisions about what is ethical or not ourselves, but rely on people that are dealing with it in a certain way already in their day-to-day.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. We just have a comment from Andre I want to share. He says he agrees with us that data needs to be accessible and utilized where people work, but a visual is a lot more digestible than words. So that part of the data visualization, he predicts will become more central with AI rather than less. And I think it's just a balance, right? There's stuff that we have to do through UI today that's better done through words, but there are things that, a visualization, a line chart communicates trends over time more viscerally
Yeah,
than reading a summarization via text. So I think it's just a question of both.
absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah, Shohini here asks or suggests the way that AI can adapt better to us is by ensuring that it takes in better context from our actions or our interactions. And do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, but I think there's something that we all need to think about, right? Because what we're basically saying with that is we want AI to be even more like humans, but that means we need to even give more access for AI towards our lives. Simple example, right? How likely is it that you want AI to record every single meeting you have at work, right? Like, are you feeling comfortable with that? Because that would be the ultimate getting more context from how you work into it. But as you know, or as I maybe sometimes do, I sometimes have coffee chats and I have informal meetings too, where I don't want it to be recorded. I might share something private that I don't want any AI bot to get to know, right? Then it might not need to do it. But it might have been smarter to do that still, just for some AI agent to learn for myself how to imitate me the best. And one other point to this only is I think we can let AI get as much access as possible to our interactions and our output as we can, but it will never be able to completely imitate how our brains work and how we make decisions, right? And I always compare it to all the AI models, they learn from our outputs, right? The things we write down, the things we express, and so on. But it doesn't really have access to our brains of how our thought process works, right? It doesn't really see how we come from A to B and we make a decision C. And that is something that we as humanity have not even completely figured out yet, right? How can we expect AI to actually figure it out? So as long as it only learns from the output, it will just imitate and feel eerily human because of it sounds very much like our output, but the decision-making process and our thought process will stay very much human. And we need to just be clear about where the boundary is of how much AI can actually imitate it and be better and more human than it is right now.
I think that's a great point. A few great points you bring up there. One is that we don't understand our own cognition. and how it results in the outputs that it generates. And it's also true of AI, right? We do not understand how AI comes up with the outputs that it comes up with in a lot of ways, right? There's kind of a ghost in the machine, that has emerged that we don't understand. And it's important to keep that in mind, right? That AI, in many ways, its output looks like our output, but it is not generated in the same process that a human being generates output, right? It is doing it's almost doing an imitation of us in a lot of ways, but it's fundamentally different the way that machine cognition works and human cognition. We think, right?
Absolutely,
because we don't really understand either. And so keep that in mind when you're interacting with these systems. We have 5 minutes left. And so you've been a great audience. You have great questions. I do, of course, would be remiss of me not to point out the QR code that's floating above my head here. Do pick up a copy of Tiankai's book. He addresses many of these points in there. And, I think our conversation has gotten a little philosophical. This is a philosophical book. It is also a practical book. And it is focused on how you can practically take these big ideas, but implement them within your organization, within your job, within your team in a way that centers the human beings that need to be working with AI, and that the AI should ultimately benefit. Right. We've talked a lot about technology today, but the book is called Humanizing AI Strategy. And it really does. I think Tiankai, it's such a great guide to putting the human being at the center of what you're doing in AI, particularly because we're moving so fast. In the technology is moving fast. The way we try to implement it is moving fast. I do want to ask you about that a little bit. You mentioned in the book a lot of times failures for AI results from putting speed above all else, right? When it comes to implementing these things. Are there any real world examples or stories you can share of like failures caused by, hey, we did not take the time to center humans. We just went all technology. Let's just go as fast and as far as we can, and ways that's blown up on people?
Yeah, I mean, I think not even only in AI. I think that happened all across the world, probably, most likely. I mean, let's say, and this is just one small detour, but when humanity invented airplanes for the first time, I think there were just a lot of airplanes that broke and crashed at first, right? Before it actually was figured out, you need to have certain safety mechanisms to let it fly a longer time period. But if we look at basically AI, right, and I think I might mention a few examples that a lot of people have heard already, but we have the Chevrolet case that was like 2 years ago or something, right, where they let a chatbot make actually contractually valid transactions, and someone basically figured out how to prompt the chatbot into making a $1 car sale, right? And they needed to actually follow up on that because they made it contractually obliged to do so. So that person just bought a $1 Chevrolet car, right? The other one I think was Microsoft doing like a Twitter bot called Tay. And there was AI, and they let it basically run wild and learn from the Twitter community. And it became immediately racist and super anti-women and all of the bad things that happened, because you cannot really control how it observes, and you would not get all the trolls and all of the bad people with bad intentions, right, to actually influence something like that. So in the way, you just kind of put speed first, right? And you want to see it, things will go well already. Because speed is also always connected to an over-optimistic sense, I feel like, and hope that it will go well. But if you don't consider what might go wrong, then the speed very quickly becomes failing fast instead of succeeding sustainably, right? And I think another one is just only thinking short term and not really long term, right? And I get that for AI, a lot is about experimentation first. But once you're beyond that experimentation phase, you need to still think about what long term makes sense. Otherwise, it might very quickly become a waste of money and energy and resources too. And we cannot afford a lot of that anymore, right, nowadays. So yeah, that is kind of, I think, where the speed comes from. It just kind of gives that short-term reward, but maybe actually it leads to a midterm failure, and more of that is not going to help anyone.
Yeah, I think we're going to that's very insightful, Tiankai. We're gonna start wrapping things up here. I want to share one last thing from the chat. This was really a quote that came in from Una van Hoof, and they say, maybe we should be a better example in cooperating with each other and discussing and respecting one another's opinions. And I think that's very prescient. And thank you for sharing that with us.
On that note, Una, this is just an observation. I don't really have a key takeaway for this, right? But I noticed that when we start actually recording meetings and let AI transcribe it, that people are generally nicer to each other because they feel like they're being observed and they're being transcribed, right?
Yeah.
Be that as it may, you think about what that means, because in a way we let a machine observe us and that forces us to be nicer to each other. Is that a good or a bad thing? I mean, I'm not saying we should now start recording everyone and just to everyone is nicer, because it still has to come from the right place in your heart and from having good intentions first, right? And because otherwise we're always going to just put on an act. But it's an interesting paradox right now where AI makes us at least act nicer than we usually are.
Yeah, right. You're on your best behavior because now that's a great point. Like you feel that there's an observer. Well, there is an observer.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to wrap things up there. I want to thank you all for joining us, joining Tiankai and I today to celebrate the release of his book, A Humanizing AI Strategy. Here it is. You can get your copy by looking at the QR code here that will take you to it to buy your copy. I highly recommend it. I really can't say enough about what an important book I think it is. I think, Tiankai, it seems like you're a man on a mission to make sure that people stay at the center of everything we do. So I just want to thank you for the work you put into this. I just think it's really important. So congratulations on the release of the book and everything.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up there. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much. Last thing, Tiankai, if people want to keep up with you as you go forward, where can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to maybe hear more about your thoughts about that topic, but also maybe if you read the book, what your feedback about it is. If you have been here from the very start, I have also more music videos than the one that we saw in the beginning. I have a YouTube channel for that. You can check that out. And also, right, in any case, just reach out to me. And if you want to work together, also very happy to discuss with you how we can do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tiankai. Congrats again on the release of the book. And keep up with Tiankai. I'm Ryan Daly, VP of Product Strategy at Good Data. You can follow me on LinkedIn. And Tiankai will be appearing on my podcast coming up, the Super Data Brothers show. So do check that out as well. And on behalf of ThoughtWorks, congrats, Tiankai, and thanks for joining us today, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.